Hello and welcome to another episode here for the capture part in the texture series. And in this very short, hopefully, episode, I want to talk about this little guy here, the RAW or the JPEG option. And I use normally to have both here just for security and for comfort. But the truth is, RAW is the only format that matters to me, at least, and I want to give you, of course, a short refresher about this. I have talked about this in other series, but it's very important to start out with a camera that is set to RAW. If you have not a camera with RAW, don't be frustrated. A good JPEG might give you something, but it's not really the final quality. And that for many reasons. First of all, when you see here this little logo or something else like here the neutral version, this is all stuff that goes into the JPEG. It will not go directly into the RAW. And all of these settings here finally go into this histogram. So we reflect a little bit, and that goes, of course, then finally as adjustments into RAW. When I say adjustments, this is how we expose finally, where we put here this little guy to the left or to the right. And then we get a picture that has maybe here something crunched or here something clipped. It's important when we want to get away with one exposure that we have here a little bit space. Here more than maybe here, but we never should touch on the right side. When I say here on the left side, we should have an eye on that because there is where the noise lives. We shouldn't put our plex in that area. Just my opinion. There are many of these opinions and you should know your camera, of course. But back to the theme. RAW versus JPEG. JPEG is compressed, of course, we have uncompressed versions, but it's always from cameras, to my knowledge, 8-bit only. In this camera here, for example, we have a 14-bit processor, and that is per channel. That means for R, G, and B, each time 14-bit, and that's quite something compared to 8-bit for the JPEG. What we get also here inside, we can set up most cameras in the medium or higher level to a specific color profile. This profile is baked into the 8-bit version of the JPEG, not so much in the RAW. In the RAW, here in this camera, for example, we have baked in what we got here in this histogram, and that can be a lot. And of course, we want to have the option to develop after we have shot our image. The JPEG is already developed. There's not so much to do. With 8-bit, we are very fast on the end. And of course, we can do something with it. But the truth is, what we get with RAW is practically, not 100%, what we can see on our sensor here. This here is only on screen, I know that, but it's a representation. And we have a Bayern pattern here. The Bayern pattern is pretty much 4 elements here. Each has a little filter on top of that. For example, a red one, a green one, and then a green one again, and here a blue one. For example, that might vary, and we have different versions of sensors. Yes, I know all of that. But the majority of Bayern pattern is pretty much this way. And then we have here, of course, the next green and the next blue, and here the next green, and so on, and here the next red. And when we want to have one pixel with RGB, it is a process that we then take in the computer finally to get for each and every of these elements RGB values. And there's the big difference. When we get a JPEG, this method is already done, and we get RGB values here in the JPEG, and then we can't do anything at all anymore. But keep in mind that the debayering, as the process is called, is a process where we finally decide how this is done. And even if we say not actively how we want to do it, we have different ways to do this. There are not only Adobe Camera Raw, for example, which is really not bad, but there are more professional versions of RAW developers, and the system will of course increase in quality over the time. And that is the fantastic part of it. You shoot something today, and maybe in 2 years you can, with a new debayering, create a better picture out of it. With the JPEG, I have no idea how that might work. There will be something certainly that can improve data, but in the moment we have the data from the sensor, we are better off. And then we have, of course, to discuss what is finally inside of the RAW. In DSLRs and in most mirrorless cameras where we can have RAW, the ISO that we have set up here is pretty much baked in. When we take, for example, as comparison, a RED camera, this is only metadata. The ISO is not baked in to the data. To make that more clear, it means what the sensor in a RED camera finally sees, what hits it, is recorded. And when we take here this camera, when we set up an ISO, the data that is contained then as pixel value or element value here is already factored with the ISO. There's of course a big misconception that the sensitivity of the sensor is better with higher ISO. This is only a mathematical game, and it's like an amplification. It's not really that we have instantly a new sensor. And the higher we go, the lower the quality gets, the lower the whole process is, and the more we have to rely on a good development. If we bake this already in JPEG, we are done. With the constant development of RAW developers, with debayering methods, we have maybe a chance even to get something that we have used with 12,800 ISO, that we can improve this maybe later on. There's of course a lot of things more to say about all of that process and how it works on the end. What I encourage you is only to stay at least with RAW. If you put JPEG as well on it, is up to you, but for anything that belongs in the texture area, I would go always with RAW. And I know there are some books even about that people say you can get away with JPEG when you expose correctly. I argue that heavily because in JPEG we have that ugly gamma curve in. And it helps of course to give us the values from the sensor in a way that we expect to have it for our eyes. So it's like a Polaroid. It's like something that is for direct use. But in the moment we want to process this maybe with a different color profile and we move these things around, we screw up things heavily. And RAW is there about a much better thing. And of course, it's not just that RAW is linear in the whole storage. There are different methods to store this, but it's most likely in a logarithmic way, and that follows more the idea how linear light works than our eye works. There's a difference in it, and I don't want to go too deep into it. I repeat myself here, RAW is the way to go, and if you haven't anything RAW in a camera, then shoot at least bracketing with JPEG so you can overcome some of the limitations. Okay, this was a refresher only and a little bit rant about JPEG, sorry about this, but I need to make clear that you get the best quality, of course. Thanks for listening, have fun with it, bye bye.